listening to yet another episode of...
I would like to do... Merry Christmas. I would like to do it this time. You always do that. And this year, I want to give myself a Christmas present by starting it off.
Oh, come on. Hey, listen. But I always start it off.
Well, but I'm going to start it off this time.
But I always start it off.
But that's why I'm doing it this time.
Oh, come on.
Welcome to Smash the Bug podcast. We are very happy to be here with you, and I will be your host today, starting off the podcast. If you are not subscribed already to this fantastic podcast, then please do so in your favorite podcast listening application. We have some
that's why I always do it, because that was rough.
It was not rough. It was smooth as all get out. Anyways, we are here to talk about the new MacBook Pro just a little bit in case you're thinking about getting something for yourself for Christmas. We are here to talk about some other news in the Magento and PHP sphere, and we are going to be talking about refactoring code, that is. So, speaking of news, what news do we have from this last month?
Well, we've talked about it in the past, but this December 2021, we're still in 2021, almost into 2022, but December brings us the end of life of PHP 7.3. May it rest in peace. It was, PHP 7.3 was one of those, it was the version, I don't know why, it didn't seem like there was as much adoption going to 7.4, as there was a lot of stuff stuck on 7.3, and I don't know why, but that great adoption has now... Well, that version with the great adoption has now being sunsetted into the past. Now, of course, there's a lot of hosting companies that still continue to support it, provide patches, for Red Hat being a great example, for who knows how many years in the future. But either way, PHP 8 is the next greatest thing, which means that the next version of Magento is almost around the corner. I can't necessarily say that it is, but PHP 8 support is coming very soon. And actually, I think it's PHP 8.1 if I'm not mistaken. So really, really great, awesome things, and a perfect chance to refactor your code as time permits here in the next year.
You know, it's been a little surprising to me that Magento hasn't already released Magento 8 support, and so I feel like this is kind of a weird time where we have a rather limited number of PHP versions that are still actively supported by PHP and actively supported by Magento. And hopefully in the near future that will change with PHP 8, which brings some really great features. One of my favorite is that null safe operator, rather.
Oh, man.
Which will be super nice to avoid. You can chain, and just like in JavaScript, if it reaches a null value, it won't continue down the chain. It'll stop right there. So I'm definitely looking forward to that one.
And we don't have to worry. I mean, we have these if statements with extension attributes, right? Which is like the first immediate thing that comes to my mind. These if statements, I mean, we get 3-4 tall, and it's like, why do we do that when... And then I go to JavaScript and I just use that question mark in front of the dots. That's right. JavaScript.
Question mark dot.
Yeah. It's like, wow, that is so nice. And it's coming to PHP. So there is a first opportunity to consider some refactoring right there.
I shouldn't say this, but I'm a little partial to JavaScript myself. So I'm very happy when PHP does borrow from its neighbor and implement those in PHP. I'll take that.
Yeah, it happens fairly regularly lately, I think.
Yeah,
I mean,
like arrow functions, things like that.
Yeah, that's another feature coming in PHP 8, I think, isn't it?
It might already be here in PHP 7.4. I don't remember right off.
Yeah, okay.
But it's great. Another thing that's just released as of like today when we're recording this podcast is a new theme called Breeze, which is looking to be a Luma theme alternative with much better performance and minimal changes that need to be made in terms of tooling and process and things like that. It comes with critical CSS, which in my opinion isn't necessarily just a straight out benefit because that does introduce some significant differences compared to the Luma theme, but they work to make the JavaScript quite interoperable, which I think is really cool and provides a very interesting alternative for somebody who's looking for something that's similar but more performant. And time will tell the adoption that we get, and I believe that's by SwiftOtter Labs.
And I'm excited about that because this is a very interesting time in the whole ecosystem, right? We got Hyvä, and Adobe has said some very positive things about Hyvä, which I'm very pleased to see. But it's $1,000, and in the grand scheme of things, $1,000 is chump change, especially for what you get with Hyvä. But this kind of seems to be a bit of a Hyvä competitor, and I'll be really curious to see, like, there's been a huge amount of energy and excitement behind Hyvä, but I'm curious, like, how Breeze kind of fits into the structure of things. And the thing that just strikes me off the bat with Breeze that sounds attractive is how it doesn't require a complete rebuild of a theme,
Exactly.
right?
Yep.
And just a way to drop something in to improve the performance of the Luma theme, that would be a Christmas present right here.
Yes, absolutely. Tell me about, speaking of Christmas presents, tell me about any news that you might be able to think of in the certification area.
Yes. And just before I jump into that, if you notice these are wobbling, I try to drop a picture of this up later, but we are talking on top of 3 Zappos boxes, these mics, and so if you see them kind of bouncing around a little bit, that's because there's Zappos boxes underneath here. This is yeah. So anyways, certifications. Adobe has been going through a refresh cycle of pretty much all their, and a reevaluation of all their certifications, Magento-related certifications. And they updated Business Practitioner. What was that at the end of August? I think that was end of August. And now they have updated Expert Developer, Front-End Developer, and Professional Developer. ADO E709, 710, E709, E710, and E711, respectively.
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm a little impressed that you remember the numbers.
Well, I've had to work with them a lot lately. So anyways, this weekend I took, and I'll be putting out more information about this here shortly, I took the ADO E709, the Expert Developer rebuild, and I was genuinely impressed with the content of the test. The delivery, I had some serious problems. I spent literally 2.5 hours trying to take, meta time. So I was spent about an hour taking the test and then 2.5 hours around that,
So
with technical difficulty. Yeah, technical difficulties. So that was a little bit different than I was anticipating, but I was incredibly impressed with the test. It was well written. There was some super tough questions on there. A lot of the questions are fairly long form now, so it takes some serious comprehension to understand what's going on with those questions. And one of the biggest differences, though, is 3 questions versus 4 questions, or 3 answers versus 4 answers in the on the multi-choice or multi-select answers. So we have chosen to maintain 4 answers on our practice test. I don't think the difference is that material, and I think 4 makes it just a little bit harder. So again, our practice material, we want to make it give you harder stuff than the actual legit test. But I was very impressed, and I did pass. So that was the good step.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That was a Christmas present right there.
No, that's great. That's a big accomplishment, given the fact that you didn't study at all. I'm impressed with that.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
But that's ultimately what I think is the real test of the test, right? You should be able to go in and take a test, and it's to assess where you're currently at. Now, study is good. Everybody studies, but I think it's the truest form of a test if you go and take it without studying.
Yeah, that's great. And so looking forward to more information coming up soon on that.
And I've been trying to talk you into taking the front end test.
Yeah, well, should be able to do that here soon, hopefully.
Nice.
So new MacBook Pro. This has created quite a little buzz, at least on Twitter, over the past several months. And if you haven't seen it, you should definitely check it out. It's an impressive machine. And I was able to get one myself, and several of our team have them as well and are running them, and running very well. I have absolutely been blown out of the water by the performance of these machines. And I will say that it has basically taken the pain out of Magento development for me. I cannot believe how fast that machine is. And I got the M1 Max. I assume the M1 Pro isn't that far off. But the 16-inch M1 Max is absolutely, it's bonkers. It's like, I want to say 5+ times the speed of the high-end Intel processor that I had in my last MacBook Pro.
This is insane.
I cannot believe the difference. It's crazy. And it takes these page loads for Magento down in that second or less area. I'm running it on a native Mac type of setup. So this is not a Docker setup, but I'd be surprised if it's terribly far off on Docker. And
we are looking forward. We have been investing in getting Docker going for the Warden installation working on M1. So we've been making some investments, sponsoring that to an extent, and hopefully that will be set. But I'll be very curious though, because there's consistent complaints about Docker performance on Mac. But what we're doing, we're running it pretty well raw, and I haven't got mine set up yet. I'm really looking forward to it. And hey, wonders of all wonders, it has an HDMI port.
Yeah.
It has.
They have definitely taken
an SD card port. Like, this is incredible. Like, this is new thinking. Oh wait, except they had it 5 years ago. So
I know. That's
so
right.
that maybe it's not such new thinking.
And they ditched the touch bar across the top or whatever that little color thing was called. That
a worthless LCD or LED display. Yeah,
it was crazy. Like, anytime I wanted to use it, it was actually off. Like, they turned it off so quickly when I was using it. It's like, what was the point of it anyways?
And so, if you are looking for a Christmas present, or CEOs, if you are the CEO or president or some director of development for a agency, make sure to invest in that. We've been working to get our team upgraded to the M1 Max. The value is absolutely there in it, and I understand stuff can't just happen. They're expensive, right? And you have to, like, there's a process and a financial cycle you have to work through in order to get there. But get there, you will absolutely love these new machines, as we have been experiencing ourselves.
Yeah, so just a practical example of a tangible difference that it's made for me. Before, when I would do development, I would often make a change, refresh the page, and then it would take so long, 5, 6, 7 seconds for that page to load, that my mind would often want to shift out of development mode into something else. But this practically eliminates that for me, to where I go refresh the page and it's just back and forth. Like, the uncached page load times are about what the cached page load times were before for me.
Absolute insanity
in my tests. Yeah,
total insanity.
And that's one of those things that I see making a difference for development team in terms of efficiency and everything like that, because they are able to focus more efficiently on their work.
Being really candid here, I think that's one of the things I have liked least about Magento 2. I like the architecture. We'll talk about some of the refactoring stuff here in a second. But there's a lot of things I like about Magento 2. I just greatly despise having to wait 5 to 10 seconds. And I think you absolutely nailed it. Our mind starts sidetracking, going somewhere else, just because we're not focusing. And that's where I find I'm so productive. If I have to build a module or something, I have to, build something that's hundreds or thousands of lines of code. I mean, I'm in there, I'm working, and I can build a lot of code. Then I go test it or refresh, whatever the mechanism I'm using to verify this that I'm writing. But if you're debugging and you have to do a refresh, or you can't get it you can't use an integration test, or it takes too long to get going, that is incredibly distracting. And these new computers, I haven't gotten mine set up yet, and I'm really looking forward to it. But these will make a tangible difference.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So let's talk about refactoring, and that's kind of especially relevant to this whole topic of performance, as oftentimes when we go into refactor, we're looking for improved performance.
That's right.
And so what are some of your perspectives on reasons that we would refactor, or things that we're looking for when we're refactoring?
Well, if I could even back up a little bit past that, I also was thinking as well about what is refactoring. And I think, in my perspective, refactoring is revisiting code. So we're working on this particular, we have a bug or something that we're working through, and we come across some code that could have been written 3 months ago, honestly. That's how some of the stuff works. And we say, wow, that is spaghetti. That's awful. Whatever. I mean, it looks terrible. Refactoring, I take it as coming in and saying, okay, we need to make some adjustments here, and I'm going to set aside some time to bring this up to a more understandable level. It could be that documentation in the code is missing. There's something that's not clear about how this class works. It could be that the class was written first PHP 7.1, and wow, I'm looking forward to it. We're going to be at PHP 8.1 here soon, right? And so he's like, oh, wow, I can shorten up, and we're going to be doing a lot of this. We can shorten up these if statements from 3 lines and use the null safe operator to bringing it down into one line. So that's what I view as refactoring. Does that, you want
I
thoughts on that one?
absolutely agree. And I think that's one of those things is asking the question of why do we want to do this? And I think relative to that, like you commented on taking some time to do that. For me, sometimes I don't want to say that it doesn't take me more time, because it absolutely does. But sometimes I like to refactor to be able to format code in a way that I can more easily look through it. Right, so it can almost help me accomplish the goal that I am looking to accomplish. And so I agree with your perspective that refactoring is a matter of revisiting code, and then that asking the question, okay, when we revisit code, why would we want to change it? And those would be some aspects. Maybe it is a PHP version upgrade, or maybe we see performance optimization that we can do, or maybe we can clean up the formatting or something like that. But again, for me, sometimes it is, I'm going to be working in this class and making some modification or something. I want to rearrange this into a structure that's cleaner.
Absolutely. And I think, well, if nothing else, like PHP Storm has the automatic formatting that I think most of us have enabled. I think it can cause a bit of a pain, right? When we didn't have it enabled and now we do have it enabled, and our merge request is a whole bunch of formatting tweaks, space tweaks, and that sort of thing. That can cause some issues, but. And I think refactoring code comes back to a willingness to take just a little extra time. Now, if it's talking about completely revisiting the entire architecture, and by revisiting the architecture, you're going to probably introduce a whole bunch of bugs. At that point, you probably want external counsel. Let's just put it that way, for this decision. But going in, and of course, you need counsel for anything we're talking about here, right? This is between you and your management team, et cetera. But being willing to get in there and say, okay, this method, the cyclomatic complexity is really high. This is difficult to read. There's some new features, and I know the merchant sites are running on PHP 7.4, and I can now take advantage of this site on PHP 7.4. It's this type of stuff that makes my life, when I do it, significantly easier. And I think the challenge, so there's a couple of things. There's a whole bunch of things bouncing around my mind right now. The one big thing to remember, the easiest thing to remember, is refactoring inside of a black box, I find is the easiest thing to do. So for example, we have a public method, we have our incoming arguments, and we have our return type as an output. And hopefully we do have a return type on the output. Hopefully we have return types on the inputs. Those are the first two things to start to consider refactoring.
Quick note on that, in case someone doesn't know, return type in PHP can be specified with the colon and then the type specified after the method. So then PHP will actually check those types during runtime, which is different than a doc block, where you can suggest, hey, I think this is what this method is going to return. So having those fixed return types in PHP is a really good thing.
And I will say that adding these can be very dangerous. If code has been built, and I'm not even going to use the word sloppy, but if their code has been built without structure or doc blocks or these return types, you don't know what type is coming through. And while you think it might be a object of a product interface, there are some cases, add product on the quote item, add product, or quote add product method, it might return a string. And creating an after plugin with that requires a product interface as the incoming return type will likely throw some serious errors when a product is added that is out of stock. So be very careful when adding return types and incoming argument types. Well, return types are easier. Incoming argument types are a little more tricky. So just be very careful with this. But what I was saying earlier is this black box stuff. If you for the most part, I feel free to rebuild and restructure the contents of a method inside of a method. When it comes to actually reorganizing classes, that's where we have to be much, much more careful and methodical. But as long as the inputs are the same and we send the same output, it's pretty straightforward. And this is where, my friends, as we've talked about in the Ninja training, integration tests are dynamite. There has been a good number, or several times, I'm going to say, just to be really on the conservative side here, that I have built an integration test or written some code, built an integration test, come back later, said, wow, I don't like how I did this one way or another, updated or refactored this method, reran their integration tests until it worked. It was the most easy, simple way to vet the refactoring that I just did. So we've done 2 Ninja trainings on integration testing, and I hope to continue to put out more information about this just because of the value that it presents.
Yeah, definitely take a look at those. This is, I think, such an important topic, and one of the aspects that I think can kind of slow us down in this refactoring considerations is a willingness to admit that we're wrong. And especially if we are the ones doing it, who wrote the code originally, it could feel like, we messed up or something like that. And
that's a good point.
I actually kind of like see it the other way around, is that, I've actually improved some in this last, day or month or a year, whatever the time span is there, like coming back and sometimes it isn't improvement at all. It might, even though that might feel like that's the case to us, the reality is I'm able to look at it with a different kind of perspective. And then that helps me recognize some of the flaws with the way that I originally wrote the code that allows me then to revisit it. But even if it is, those sorts of flaws originally, it's still okay. And it's good to go back and revisit those things and make those changes to improve the quality of the code. And I think that's, at least for our team, that's what refactoring really comes down to, is delivering that quality every time and improving that quality. Like we can't be perfect in the things that we do, but we certainly can strive for perfection, and we can improve over time that quality. And that's what I like to see out of that refactoring process.
Well, another one of the reasons, like you said, coming back, and what I took from that is, come back, we find, wow, we've improved. This code looks terrible. I can't read it. Whatever. Like that's the reason. But one other common time that I also see for refactoring is the way requirements work. Anybody? We start with this beautiful architecture, and we are so proud of it. We of course have more requirements, and it just keeps stacking up over time, and eventually we look at this as like, wow, this is an absolute disaster. It could have been that the initial build was not architected correctly. And I find that's a common challenge for me, is that I architect something with the idea of here and now, as opposed to, okay, I can guarantee you stuff is going to change in the future. And so how can I adapt this out? There is a class in, actually 2 classes, I think, in a project that we're working on right now, a very custom display of some order-related information. And I think it's a great example of this type of a concept. It uses UI components very heavily, very custom. So it's not like just dropping grids on the form and then some form fields. Like, it's really custom fields. And over the course of time, we've added more fields and customizations and settings, and more data we put in there, and more UI components. And it's gotten into a bit of a regular disaster.
Yes, no kidding. And it's like 400, 500 lines, something like that, which is, by the way, huge from my perspective.
Well, is it one method that's that long?
No, I think it's the class.
I thought it would have been more than that, but
okay. It
seems like 5,000 lines,
and it's unwieldy too. Like the methods are big, and there's these massive arrays that it's returning and things like that. But what we're doing is we're refactoring that whole class over time, and we're pulling things out of that class, which is one of those things. You don't have to fix the whole problem in one pull request. As a matter of fact, you probably shouldn't. You should do it iteratively over time to just improve that quality. And I agree regarding it, that is the challenge. Like, requirements do change. And one of the things that came to mind as I thought about refactoring and the considerations that are that is that willingness to be bold and to make changes that are scary. And I've made plenty of changes where it's like, I feel like this could be a really big change. And so my response to that is to be really careful making the change, but still go ahead and do it anyways.
That's right.
And I recognize that's risky, a risky thought to give, because, you shouldn't just go in there and be like, oh man, this is a scary change to make, but I'm going to make it anyways, because Jesse on the podcast said that was a good idea. And to be clear, that's kind of what I'm saying, but not, because those types of changes are to be done with caution. But that's
right.
where those sorts of things are. Like the requirements grow and grow and grow, the class grows, and then all of a sudden you're in a situation where it should be revisited. And it is a scary thing to do, but it's worth doing. And looking for ways to how you can start the process of iteratively improving that method back to or that class or that whatever, back to the point where it's going to be a dynamite, easy to understand, quality, performance method or class, which is what we're looking for.
Well, the question is, how do you eat an elephant?
Well, this is a trick question.
No.
I see what you're doing. It's one bite at a time.
That's right.
I do know the answer.
Yeah, you did. I thought you did. So it wasn't that. There's that animal safari joke like that's really good about. I won't go there. Really good one. But
I have heard it before though, so probably wouldn't be as funny to me right now.
yeah, I know. But it might be those of you out who are listening to this might enjoy this. But I think that's the thing. So. Okay, let's say we get into a class that looks like this. It's 500 lines. It's an absolute disaster. What steps do we take in that process? And I think the one bite at a time is the way that I like to approach stuff. So, for example, in this case, what I did is at the end of that, just before this array was returned out, I passed the pertinent incoming details like the quote and the order details. Those were passed into each method in these processors, but these processors return an array, and that array would then be added to this UI component. So the details would still be there. It was very the term is immutable. It was immutable. So it was not, each one of these processors was not like changing the incoming data structure, which that can cause a whole bunch of problems right there too. And it was very non-confrontational is not the right term. It was minimal impact, you might say, because at the end of the day, the existing information was still there. I didn't touch much of that at all, but I had these processors. So anytime we now add something new, provided we hopefully always have the discipline to follow through with adding another processor, and I don't think the processor is the right term. Data gatherer or something like that.
Like a provider.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for.
That Magento uses with UI component data providers.
Yeah, a provider. So adding another provider in, it's not a big deal. And all of that is just tucked away in DI.XML. It doesn't trash our class at all. And that becomes an iterative approach. So eventually, and here's where the discipline comes in, we're touching one of these UI components inside this massive UI component structure, and we pull that out and we drop it into a provider. Later, when we're working another one, we pull that out and drop it into a provider. And communication is good. We can say I think it's important to tell the merchant, project manager, whatever, hey, look, we are making some modifications to this. According to our test, it's looking good. We don't see any differences, any problems, but please do review this on your side as well.
Yes, absolutely. That aspect of communication and trying to foresee any possible problems that could arise from it is an important aspect of that. And I think we could talk for a really long time about what things like I would look for in a refactoring sort of context. But honestly, if I was to bring it down to just a few aspects, one of those would be performance, obviously. But another one that I see is kind of more relevant to day-to-day work for me is clarity, naming, things like that. Basically, in isolation, can I put this code in a single box that does one thing? Maybe before this box was big and it had holes all over it. Can I move that out of that box and name it nicely and put it in a single box on its own? Like we all know when we organize stuff, that's what we do. We get containers, we get boxes, we put stuff in there and we put a label on it, and then we don't have to figure out what is all in this junk box. We know, this box contains t-shirts from that race I ran in 2000, that sort of thing. Like then we don't have that mental load there.
2000, boy, you've been really young at 2000.
Well, yes, that does get back a long ways. But maybe some of those listening are older, like you. Anyways,
okay, fair enough.
See,
okay.
So that's what we do with that. So wrapping up that code inside of a single entity. How can we box stuff up better and make it easier to understand?
Absolutely. I think that's good. And you're going to hear over the coming months a significant emphasis from us about just understanding architecture, understanding what goes into building things right. And it's been a challenge for us as we've grown, as we learn, and we're still learning like crazy all the time. And that's why I've been super excited about some of these really great people who are on our team, like some real rock stars, and the value they've contributed to me, and maybe I've contributed a little value to them. I don't know. I hope so. But I guess what I'm saying here is being able to share with your team, to get feedback from your team, to learn from other people on your team, refactoring, architecture, whatever it is, that's really important. That's why we're talking about it here today.
Yeah, absolutely. But all good things must come to an end, and it's a good time to wrap this up. I do want to wish you a Merry Christmas and
all the other holidays. And all the other holidays too, yeah.
Because we celebrate Christmas here in the U.S., but not everybody across the world does.
Yeah, Hanukkah and there's a couple others out there that I'm missing specifically, but yes.
Yeah, and a New Year's. That's going to be before us, before we know it. And Happy New Year to you as well. So thank you for watching us. I hope you've been able to learn some good things from what we've discussed today. And again, if you're not subscribed to us, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever you like to listen to podcasts, please do subscribe and give us a thumbs up. We would sure be grateful for that. Great to be here with you today.